I'm Shelley Tugis. I'm the interim co-director at the Hudson Library, and we are doing this ongoing series, Voices in the Valley, to help build understanding in our community and hopefully improve the culture in our community, because it's been pretty rough, honestly. It was hard to find people who wanted to speak at this event tonight, and I think that says a lot, unfortunately. So tonight we have LGBTQ Voices in the Valley, and I have a few thank yous to put out there before we get going. First is Hop and Barrel. They're an amazing community partner. They do great things. We're very lucky to have them. River Channel for taping it and making sure we have a live stream, and it will also be up on their YouTube channel. And Madeline Page. She is my friend and partner in crime at the library, the other interim co-director. She's going to moderate tonight. And Allison, because I'm worried about pronouncing your last name correctly, I don't want you to be proud of me. Addison Filiatro. I did it. I practiced in the car a few times. She's been instrumental in getting speakers, working on logistics, helping with questions, just phenomenal passion and commitment to this issue. So thank you so much for all of that. So the panel tonight, first, full disclosure, the wonderful Vicki is my stepdaughter, and she has a wonderful husband. This is Jason. Vicki lived in Hudson for a while and has since moved west of here, but was gracious enough to come back, and they're going to share some of their experiences as a couple, living in Hudson, living in larger areas. And then we also have Brandon and Sarah, and they're going to decide what they want to tell you about jobs and residences and all of that when they start taking questions. So thank you so much. It was good to see you. I have to go to a meeting, but I will be watching live and on YouTube. So thanks, everybody.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for the introduction, Shelley. Much appreciated. I just want to say thanks again for being here tonight. So, we'd like to start with just a round of quick introductions. So if each of you would tell us a little bit about your job, where you live, how you identify your relationship status, feel free to just tell us whatever you are comfortable sharing to start. Thanks.
Yeah, we do the same thing. That's true. We can have our masks off near each other because we're married. We're in the same COVID pod. My name is Victoria Russo, or Vicky. This is my husband, Jason. We're both bisexual. We're both social workers, and we live in East St. Paul, Minnesota. Jason's from Minnesota. I'm from North Carolina, but I did live in Hudson briefly with Shelley when I was a bit younger. I identify as a cisgender woman.
I am a trans man.
So there you go.
Yeah, and we are married.
We are married. And still bisexual.
My name is Sarah, and I have lived in Hudson for about 4 years with my wife. And I identify as cisgendered, but I am lesbian, but I use the words gay or queer, usually just because lesbian was always used negatively growing up, but I'm okay if people use it, but also just because gay and queer are just one syllable and a little easier to throw into a sentence. So, and I work in the metro area as a massage therapist in hospice.
Hello, everyone. Oh, wow. This is weird speaking in front of people, like live. Usually it's in front of a screen and you're all little boxes. I don't see a cat, so I don't know really what to do. No. My name is... See, there you go, we have a cat. My name is Brandon. I have lived in the St. Croix Valley for pretty much my entire life. I identify as a gay man, so I'm the simple one, it sounds like, up here. And nothing wrong with that. That's the beauty of the community. I guess job-wise, I work at UW River Falls at the College of Business and Economics. That's also where I went to school, so grew up here, went to school here, moved away from here, and still came back here. There's beauty here, there's issues to be resolved, but it's one thing to look at the past and say we continually screwed up and what are we going to do about it, but there's another thing to look forward and say how can we learn from that, and that's kind of why I hope that this does that and why I moved back here, because it is such a good area and there's so many positives. Unfortunately, the negatives are what we think about the most, so that's what I hope to bring.
Thank you so much. So now that we did some introductions, I think the first question on my list is to ask each of you to talk about the issue of choice. So to what degree, if any, we'd like to know what you think individually. Do you think sexual orientation is a choice? So if each of you want to give us a little information on your opinion on that question, that'd be great. And for the audience members as well, feel free to write down your questions, submit them to Addison, and we will try and get through the questions that way too.
You guys start this time. Let's go this way.
There you go. Okay.
You're back up.
Back up. The one question I didn't want to start with, but here we go. Choice. That's an interesting one. I think a lot of it comes down to your personal experiences growing up and how you view that. My personal, view is your sexual orientation is not a choice, in that you're not born and you choose to be straight or you choose to be gay. What you do have a choice in is how you present that to the world. So how you identify right now may change because you're learning, you're growing, you're experiencing, you're trying to figure out who you are in this life. But what that core is, I don't think that that's a choice. I think the hardest thing is coming to find the words to share that with the world. Because choice means you're checking a box. This means that I am now choosing to check the gay box. Well, there's hundreds of other boxes that I could have checked. Is that wrong or right? Now we have to think about those choices, how that impacts how you're seen in the world, how you're perceived in the world. And that's where the issue lies, is because of that choice, you are now judged. You are now said less than. You are now perceived as trying to be better than. When in reality, it's one facet of whom we are as a human. So, no, there is no choice in your sexual orientation. We are who we are. The choice is how we present that to the world depending on our comfort level. So, that's my 2 cents. I'll pass now.
We could do snaps too.
Well, I have some dialogue. I know this is live, but
Yeah.
I would say it's not a choice at all, and I always think it's interesting because this always seems to be a question that straight people ask of LGBTQ, but they don't really think about it for themselves, because usually when straight people think about it, they're not like, did I choose to be straight? But I would agree, it's really about, the choice is really about whether or not you embrace it and embrace who you are and love who you are, or whether or not you essentially reject it or just hate yourself for it. And it might not feel like a choice depending on your family or where you grow up or your community. And I would say that I think I used to wish it was a choice when I was younger. And because it felt like just to be myself would mean risk losing everything, like my friends or family, or just being seen as a good person or a contributing member to society. But now I wouldn't, even if it was a choice now, I wouldn't change anything about who I am. So.
Okay, so as a bisexual person, we get this all the time, right? Because, you're like choosing to be with a man or a woman or a non-binary person if we're really going to get into it. But the thing is, it's like what Brandon was saying, I can choose what I present to the world. Technically, I could only date men and be relatively straight passing. Not really, but kind of. I could just choose to date men if I wanted to but that certainly doesn't remove the attraction that I feel for women. And Jason and I actually, it's very interesting, I prefer women and he actually prefers men. We ended up together anyway. So yeah, having the ability to be attracted to more than one gender doesn't necessarily mean that I chose to have that. And another thing, just to interject, that I get as a bisexual person is that, like, oh, well, you might hear like men and women can't be friends because there's like the sexual tension. So I heard a joke once that was like, bisexual people, there are no friends, there is only prey. But yeah.
Allowed to have any friends.
We're not allowed to have any friends.
All right, my wife kind of covered my sexual orientation and choice, so I'll jump over to the gender identity thing because I get to be the one representing that here. So as far as whether it's a choice, I would say that the identity is never a choice. How you feel that you are in yourself is not a choice. That is something that you come to realize because you're getting conflicting messages, so it takes a while. That being said, there is a lot of choices that trans people make as far as how they are presenting themselves. There are a lot of choices about what steps you might take as far as any transitioning medical choices, social choices, just general presentation. So gender presentation is its whole thing, and like what kind of clothing style do you wear, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of choices with that, and what makes the most sense to any individual person based on their identity and their social situation gets real messy. So yeah, sometimes someone else's choices might not make sense to you, but the identity was always there. The identity wasn't a choice in itself.
All right, so we just had a question come in, and I think it ties in perfectly with the second question we had planned. So this question is about Hudson and St. Croix County. So it's kind of a three-part question. I'd like to ask, how safe do you feel in our region in terms of your physical safety and your acceptance? And as the follow-up to that, do you feel that you're represented appropriately in St. Croix County? And if not, how can we fix that?
You technically live here.
Yes. So I would say, I've lived here for 4 years, and, I knew before living here, I lived in the metro area, and I grew up in central Minnesota, and I knew that coming to this community, that it was a conservative community. I knew there was a hate group here. I was well aware of that, and we just kind of hoped that that group was really more of a vocal minority. And around the time that we moved here, I think there was a lot of pride flags or rainbow flags being stolen, and that was concerning because it was really intimidating. But we also knew that there's a lot of people here who were working really hard to recognize the diversity and make it more welcoming, and buying as many rainbow flags to replace the stolen ones. So that was helpful for us to move here. And plus we just had my wife has worked in the community for over 9 years. So people that she knew were really welcoming to us. But in terms of safety, I think about it all the time. So I present, people assume I'm straight all the time, but when I'm with my wife, I'm always very vigilant, even if it's just walking our dog in our neighborhood, especially around so many Trump signs. I mean, that's intimidating, and I don't have anything against Republicans because my mom's a Republican. Well, I have some concerns about Republicans, but they just tend to be the ones who have the worst, most discriminating, awful policies towards LGBTQ people. But I also want to add, in terms of safety, it's not necessarily just a feeling safe physically, like from violence or discrimination. It's also, being on guard from being sexualized or reduced to my sexual orientation. So that's also something that we're kind of on high alert for. Sometimes we'll just go to, especially pre-pandemic, we just go to the cities just to be able to take a break and feel a little safer. So, like, I'm not gonna necessarily take my wife to a restaurant on Valentine's Day, in Hudson. I wouldn't feel comfortable doing that. And also being here, it's really scary being here. I know this is a community that has events like this, which is great, but I also, check back with me tomorrow if this was a wise decision. That's very concerning to me. So I don't know how to answer that other question. How can we, represent us more? Maybe don't elect people who are going to be homophobic or transphobic. And also, I think the council is looking at adding a diversity committee or something like that, and that's really promising. But also discourage the hate group, or those sorts of voices that are looking to make us feel unsafe. So that's what I think.
We want to talk about the medical together, right?
So safety. This is another one of those subjects, only just because it's a two-way street. The community is one aspect. It's how you choose to feel safe within that community. I will admit, I am a white male on the face of it, so my level of concern is quite low. That's a very privileged thing to say, and I recognize that. But even if that wasn't the case, it's hard for me to concede that victory to the other side. The world is tough regardless of your sexual orientation. It's tough because you're a woman and you're old and you have to find a new job now for some reason. It's tough because you're a tall man right there and my dad can't see you and he's behind you, so now he's mad. There are things in the world that will get you upset, that will cause anger and strife. That's life. That's unfortunately the gritty part that we don't want to talk about. The issue with safety with LGBTQ here in the community, I would say I would welcome anybody to move here and feel that they would not be harmed. Would I say that you will be accepted? I cannot answer that question truthfully and say yes. Does that mean you should not be here? Oh, hell not. You come here, you move in with your wife or your husband, and you show that you want to be a part of this community, because that's how you show and prove to the world that, one, we outpower the other people if we all did that, and two, our safety truly comes from our numbers standing together, and you are not alone. Your fear comes from when you think that you are alone walking down that street, but wholeheartedly that you know if you asked anybody to walk with you probably right now, they would look at you and say, sure. I have that hope in humanity. Now, that probably won't happen all the time. This isn't 100% success rate. So you need to go into any community. It can be walking down Hennepin Avenue doing Pride. I honestly would feel less safe there than walking down Hudson sometimes. There's an issue on both sides when it comes to safety and how we're perceived in and outside of the community. For Hudson specifically, I think there's a lot to do in terms of awareness, but I have no fear walking down that I'm going to be hurt because of my sexual orientation. A lot of that does have to do with how I'm perceived. Again, I can't hide the fact I'm a white male, so I get a lot of benefit there. Other people don't, and that's what we need to work on. That's where if you see somebody that is not of this type, that has an issue that you can see. We all see that in people. We can see the fear when it's presented to them. Stand up. Say, are you okay, hon? What's going on? That person was really loud. Do you want me to walk with you? And they might get afraid, but stand there and say, I'm not. I just want to make sure you're safe, make sure we're good. If we did that, then it wouldn't really matter what the other side said, because we would win no matter 100% of the time. So I think it's a good place. I think we can all live here and be peaceful, and I have been, so.
So I'll only speak briefly because I don't live here anymore. I did live here briefly. I don't live here anymore. That's kind of my first answer. As a queer woman, because I do use that word as well, usually not around straight people though, because then they think it's insulting, whatever. Anyway, as a queer woman, I really only have to worry about like woman stuff when I'm walking around, like regular, I could get raped in an alley kind of stuff. Regular stuff, usual stuff. Just the usual. As a person who has a partner who's transgender, however, that really took my level of awareness like up about a notch or 100, especially with everything that's going on right now. When we started dating, the bathroom thing was huge. I was like, do you need me to go and stand outside the bathroom? And he was like, honey, I have a beard. I was like, oh, right. However, I have a lot of friends who might be partially through their transition, or maybe they have chosen not to do a lot of medical transition steps that don't pass as well. And I do feel like that is incredibly dangerous in a lot of parts of this country. And I think maybe one of the most dangerous things about that is that people who are allies and who do support us and understand us, I don't think they all necessarily realize how serious it is though. Like there's this whole like, oh, everything's fine, marriage equality, and I voted for Biden, blah, blah, blah. But like Jason and I haven't left Minnesota for the last 4 years because of various reasons that we're gonna go into in a bit. But I think the best thing that could happen is for allies to be outspoken. If somebody cracks a joke or if somebody makes some offhand comment, get really feisty with them. Don't be like, oh, I want to keep the potluck nice and chill. Like, get up in their business, because that's the only way they're going to be challenged, is if we make them uncomfortable. And if they know that it's not just us, sad gay people, if there's actual, folks who I imagine your voices have more power behind us. If that makes sense. Makes sense?
Yeah, I obviously also do not actually live here. I live in St. Paul. I will say, looking at a community like this and thinking about when I actually went to college in Madison. And so I used to drive across Wisconsin a lot. And my feeling of comfort when I was in Madison or in the Twin Cities versus when I was randomly at a rest stop anywhere in between those 2 points were very different levels. So there's that. There's also, what we call passing, right? So I walk into stores and people don't look at me and instantly go, that's a trans person. And for people where people look at them and go, huh, they're typically in a lot more of danger from angry strangers. That being said, when I think about communities like this where I'm a little uncomfortable, it's mostly the sense of the unknown levels of like supportive people, non-supportive people, and neutral people. Because usually if I'm walking into a random smaller town, I have no idea, is this a place where like 80% of people don't care and there's 2 assholes over there that are just like, gonna be really obnoxious? Or is this a place where like 75% of these people think that I should die and burn in hell? And I usually don't know walking in. So as far as how to change representation in a community, think about the vocalness of allies. Think about, if you're sitting here going, you know what, we have a small group of hate group people, but a pretty substantial portion of the population is willing to listen and willing to learn and willing to come to events like this, those people need to be louder than they normally are. Normally that sort of like middle of the road group tends to be really quiet and really sit on the back burner. And so when you're the potentially endangered minority walking in and you look at a crowd and you have no idea, like, how do they feel? So asking, people that are saying, you know what, yes, I do support these people. I want my community to be a welcoming place. You need to be louder about it because you're in less danger being loud about it than the people that are a member of our group.
Well, you made that so much more coherent than I did. Thank you.
All right. So I want to switch a little bit and talk about high school. So Let's talk about the youth situation. I think a lot of us might know younger people in school who are struggling. The LGBTQ youth contemplate suicide at a rate 3 times higher than other kids. And the most recent Hudson mental health survey listed LGBTQ kids as experiencing anxiety at a rate of 85%. So I'm asking if these statistics reflect your experience with school and peers. And I'd also like to just ask about, maybe the best way to support youth in Hudson, if there's maybe a person in the audience who knows a younger person in high school who might be struggling.
You're such a good sport.
Well, I guess only because I did, go to high school here.
Oh, yeah.
So school is an interesting time. I guess my quick experience is that I was told it was a phase. I needed to grow out of it. There was no social support at the middle school when I was there. I was beat up multiple times, and the school kind of did nothing. Now, that was in 2003, 4-ish. Come to high school, 2004, 5, it did change. There was a dramatic difference in the level of support. When I was in high school, we started the GSA here in town. I don't know if that's still going on. I'm assuming it is. I remember starting that there. There were a few faculty. It's funny, I work in higher education, so they're teachers, they're not necessarily faculty. They were supportive in that they really didn't allow you to get bullied if they saw it, but if you said it happened, then there was not necessarily anything they would do. It has now changed. I would definitely say that progress has been made. There is definitely a lot more support. There's more awareness on it. Counselors can be trained in this field specifically. I don't know if Hudson has any of that. To be honest, I have not been that involved with the the education here in Hudson since I've been back. But from what I have seen in the community is that there is now more awareness on it. The biggest thing that I would say to youth or to anybody questioning what's going on, how your identity is, where you can get support is you need to just vocalize that. It's tough and it is hard and it is scary and it will make you want to leave this planet faster than the SpaceX Falcon 9 takes off. But you need to talk to somebody because you are not alone. I have been there. Sarah's been there. They've been here. We're living. I'm breathing. I think I'm alive. I don't have an artificial heart yet, like Picard. And that needs to continue. And people are afraid to talk because it's going to be messy. You're going to say things that get people upset. You're not going to know really what to use for terminology. I mean, it's weird to say the word queer, that's a thing now. But life moves on as long as you're with us. That's the biggest key, and that's where I have hope, because this is going on. I know of students that have gone through after me, and they have had better success in terms of their emotional support and happiness. Is anything perfect? Lord, no. Humans are never perfect. If we think we are, then that's a huge other issue. So, in this community specifically, we need to know that you need support, and we will provide that. Anybody here, I'm assuming, could be reached out to. If that's a yes, clap your hands. Because anybody that's watching, find the people that said yes to this event and ask. Say, I need help and I don't know where to go. I would much rather see that in my inbox at work versus seeing on the news a Hudson school student died. So.
Yep. So first of all, yeah, those statistics pretty much track. I actually went to a private Catholic high school, so that was an adventure. And mostly with that, what I'll say is I found out years later from Facebook who all of my queer classmates were. Essentially. That was, however, I graduated in 2008, so that was over a decade ago, and things may have changed there. I don't really know. As far as talking to people that are currently in high school, to the young people that are currently trying to figure themselves out and trying to find their place in the world and trying to deal with everything that it means to be a teenager in general, on top of what it might mean to be an LGBTQ teenager, one thing that I've noticed with talking to adults is that a lot of us find that maybe we didn't get support in family or community that we grew up in, and we found it somewhere else. So a lot of the adults I know that are, gay or trans or whatever, they have what they call their chosen family. They have, as they've become adults, as they've grown more independent, they have found friends and companions that are closer than their family if they didn't have that support in their environment growing up. So that's kind of the it gets better thing. It's possible that your environment isn't great for you right now if you're a young person. It's possible that you're in a family or a school that's not super supportive of you, and that sucks. But it's also something that people have been going through and that you can find support elsewhere. One of the main things that is glorious about our current modern era is you can find community with people that don't live next to you. So, internet friends are real friends. Obviously, I don't want to... I both do and don't want to tell children to find people on the internet, because there's obviously dangers to that as well. But that being said, a lot of gay and trans people end up finding community via online groups and forums and things like that, because we're a smaller part of the population, and you can just find a larger group of people reaching out that way than you might be able to at your, local community center or something like that. So that's okay. You can seek out that kind of relationship, that kind of community. You can find people that will genuinely care about you. They are out there, even if they are not necessarily standing right next to you.
I also went to a private Catholic school, and everyone did come out much later than, high school. And I graduated in the late 90s, so at that time, we weren't, we didn't even talk about LGBTQ. And, if that was ever mentioned, it was never in a positive way. There weren't celebrities, there weren't, at least ones that weren't respected. It was always a scandal.
It was just Ellen.
It was just Ellen, and
She lost her TV show.
Yeah, my mom, said we had to stop watching Ellen after she came out. So that's about as much as we ever talked about it. And most of the time we just kind of suffered in silence or in isolation at that time, and most people came out afterwards. But what I would say to kids now is that, you belong to the world, you belong here just as you are, your authentic self. And it's okay if you're not ready to come out. Do it when you feel safe and when it feels like the right time for you. And you're not alone, we exist. We absolutely exist. And there's nothing wrong with you, and you are valuable to our communities. And if you love someone who is struggling with their identity, I would just say don't force them to choose between loving who they are and being loved by you. So that's all.
Okay. So, speaking about religion, school, Catholic school, there's a lot of questions about the Bible. Does it expressly forbid homosexuality? But today, there are faith communities that embrace people of all sexual orientations. They marry them, they hire them as pastors, they have them teach their youth programs. So could you tell us if you have a faith community And also, from an audience member, what would you want from your communities of faith here in Hudson?
You're so good. Bless
He has prepped answers.
you. He has prep answers.
I do have prep
We got the
answers.
questions ahead of time. 'Cause some of us are
I do.
more prepared than others.
Well, this is, again, what happens when you're on a computer all day. You have 18 screens open, you're typing 13 different things up at one time, and your boss calls you, so. Religion. This is a hard one, only just because we do live in a society, and it's a great society where your choice of where your faith is your choice and your right to do so. That is at the forefront of what we have to remember. People that do not want LGBTQ community members in that religion, unfortunately have the choice to do that. The biggest thing to remember, and this is where my faith comes into it, is there is higher power out there that we do not know. I personally believe that humanity put it into a box called religion because that unknown is so great we cannot comprehend it. We don't know what's past Pluto, past the heliosphere, past where Voyager 1 is. I know that Voyager 1's out there, but I don't know what's beyond that and how it got there. That's the unknown of it. Society has turned that unknown into a control factor for us. And unfortunately, that has now hindered some people versus others. That has made some people better than and some people less than. I always just challenge anybody that is trying to use faith to justify their actions to say, is what you're doing going to be presented to your higher power and looked at in a good light? Because that is what we need to do as humans. That's what we need to do as fellow animals, to be honest, on this planet. Just do good. Live a life where you present what you would want to be presented onto you towards others. So with religion, it's hard because I get it. Your religion says you don't like me. I love you though. Because unfortunately, my religion and my faith says, you can choose to live that way. I choose to say I will still help you if you need a cup of sugar to bake that pie, or if your house is on fire, I will help you put it out. And many people forget that because we need to follow what the word of their entity or whoever says, word by word, book by book, page by page. Great, if that's how you choose to live, I can't stop that. I don't think the majority of us live that way. I think the majority of us, whether you're Catholic, Lutheran, agnostic, Buddhist, just want to be good people on this planet. So why don't we focus on that and really stop caring what people do in their bedrooms, in their houses, and while they're walking down the street, because it doesn't affect your life. Just be nice. So, yes, peace.
So I was raised evangelical Pentecostal in the South. Thank you. Yes, I survived it. I didn't even dance with any snakes. Yeah. I'm now eclectic pagan, so obviously that's stuck. Obviously. I will say my experience with faith communities, and I'll say specifically the Christian faith community, to other people who are part of that community and want to reach out to us and be a safe place for us, I will say a lot of times you're going to encounter people being kind of wary of you at first. I mean, at Pride, right, in Minneapolis, there's a bunch of churches that come out and they're like, we love you. And there's also churches that come out and hand us pamphlets that are like, we love you. And you open it and it's like, but you need to repent. Like, we love you, but stop sinning, please. So I think, that's what I see a lot is, you know, if people are like, hey, my church is really cool though, do you want to come? I'm like, maybe. Are there any other gay people there? We have a gay pastor. Okay, I'm coming. That's fine.
She's mentioning that a little bit because she's gone to my parents' church. So I am not religious at this point, but it's actually not because of the trans bisexual thing. I grew up both Catholic and Lutheran. just be extra special. Anyway, and my parents' Lutheran church that they now both attend, they used to go to two different churches, one Catholic and one Lutheran, but now they both go to an ELCA Lutheran church that is very opening and accepting, and they currently have a gay pastor. So that was kind of my core experience with that, although I also went to a Catholic high school and experienced that. What I'll say about this is a lot of people have experienced a lot of rejection. And like my wife was saying, a lot of people are very, very wary of Christianity, Christian churches, people who proudly express their Christianity because of their experiences, because they have heard so many, and because there are some really loud people in the media, right? I'm not going to debate the hypocrisy of various biblical interpretations of things because that's pointless and something to do with your pastor. However, if you are a member of a church and you want to be a welcoming place and you want to let people know that you are welcoming of LGBT people, you have to use buzzwords and you have to make it really, 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 really concretely obvious. Okay? You can't say all are welcome, because as it turns out, every Christian church that I drive past says all are welcome, and that's not actually true. Okay? So if you're involved in a church and you're like, I really want this to be an accepting place, you gotta write in, you have to have statements that specifically express the acceptance of LGBT people. Like, you could say things like, we are accepting of people of all gender identities and all sexual orientations, something that is like really clear. I know certain faith groups have specific like certifications your congregation can get. At least in the ELCA church, there's like an affirming congregation thing. I don't remember, my parents were talking about this. But yeah, that's what I'll say about that. If you want to be an accepting place, you got to make it real, real loud and clear, because otherwise the LGBT people in your community that maybe do want to be connected to that faith are still going to be cautious, and they're still going to be afraid because they don't know.
So I grew up Catholic, preschool through college, and I'm really grateful for that foundation. I consider myself really spiritual, but and culturally Catholic, because that is my foundation, but I'm not affiliated with any religion. But I think for me, Christianity especially has been incredibly harmful to LGBT people. And it really needs to recognize that history in order to move forward, I think, to acknowledge that it has treated people horribly and used things like conversion therapy or a lot of shame, a lot of fear to motivate people. And I also want to say that I've seen a lot of religions just say, well, I don't believe in that, in gay people, but we are not a belief system. We're not an agenda. Like we're not, and we exist. We exist everywhere, and you might not know that we exist because we don't come out to you, because you might not be safe to come out to, but we are everywhere. We own your favorite restaurant. We take care of your parents at the nursing home. We're your doctor. We're your kid's favorite teacher. Like, we are just everywhere. And so to treat us like a belief system is really demeaning. And I also think it needs to be more than just like hate the sin, love the sinner, or whatever that is. And that you can believe those things. You can certainly believe that queer people should not get married, but you have to acknowledge what you're really doing, which is really dehumanizing, and it isn't treating me equally, and it's not welcoming to do that. So that's my 2 cents.
So it seems people in the heterosexual community are the least informed about the trans community, which has been in the news a lot lately, from healthcare to military to sports. I'm just wondering if you can give us any insight into your experience.
I don't go first on this one.
No, I clearly go first on this one.
We go together. She wanted us to talk about the health thing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
First of all, this is not the first time that I have done one of these little talks in front of people, because this is a very true thing. And I'm someone who is in a fairly safe and stable general life situation with a supportive family and a lot of supportive friends. And so I get to be the one that goes and talks to random strangers and feels confident doing that. Yeah, so that's nothing new to me. Healthcare. Let's start there. So it turns out that some people don't believe that general non-discrimination laws apply to trans people. And it turns out that apparently there exist licensed medical practitioners who believe they can decide not to treat someone for a completely unrelated illness because they are trans. And that's why we have not left the state of Minnesota for 4 years. Because if we were driving, I mean, her grandma lives in Illinois.
Yeah.
If we were driving across the state of Wisconsin and got in a car accident, there's a potential risk of me not being treated by the paramedics that show up at the scene.
And it's not just a potential thing, like this happens. You can Google it. It happens.
Yeah.
People have died. When we actually did, it's a lie, we left the state one time to go to Illinois for his cousin's wedding. And his mom, who's super supportive, was like, okay, you're gonna let us know where you're at the whole time, and I'm gonna make sure that there's at least a hospital you can be airlifted to that would definitely treat you. Like, as long as you're close enough to Chicago, you're probably okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, I drove the whole way like,
Yeah.
and that's something people don't know. Our friends didn't know until, because this was before COVID. We were like, I'm sorry, we can't go anywhere. And they're like, what, why? I'm like, well, because I don't want Jason to potentially die.
Yeah, so that's a fun fact for y'all. Yeah, sometimes people turn up in the emergency room and don't get treated because someone discovers that they're trans and decide that they don't want to touch them. It's very Leviticus.
Yeah.
You are unclean and I shall not touch you. Yeah, and that's not even talking about, healthcare coverage for medical transitions and things like that, which is a whole other conversation. But yeah, so that's I think the main thing we want to say about healthcare, and just to be aware that that's a possibility, and how just like horrifying it is that there are like licensed doctors that will refuse to treat someone who's dying because they are trans.
Yeah.
You know, the House passed that bill today, just today, but the Senate.
Yeah, and that's a thing that, it becomes political. It becomes a thing that people get to vote on whether or not that's illegal, apparently.
Yeah.
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 Military sports, the military one is kind of bizarre because that's just like a random ban. Like, no, you're just not allowed to serve in the military, which seems... Why are we in the business of turning people away that want to serve in the military? That seems foolish, mostly. I don't know. Every time and the thing is, every time these debates come up and they talk to actual like people on the ground, like, people who are actively deployed, they're like, I don't care who the person next to me is as long as they got my back. Like that's the impression I get from active military people. And then it's always some sort of like hoity-toity general in their office that hasn't seen action in 40 years that seems to have an opinion.
Shots fired.
Just saying. Management's terrible. And then I don't know how much I want to say about the entire sports debate. The main thing I'll say about the sports debate is hormones do crazy things. I'm sure you all remember being a teenager. Hormones do bizarre things to your body. And hormones, fundamentally, are the main reason that people even bother having segregated sports by sex. If you think about performance measures and whatnot, that's about the hormones and what they do to muscle mass and things. That does change. I am not a good example because I am not a very active person. But you can definitely look up some really intense bodybuilding trans men and realize that it wouldn't be fair for them to be competing on the women's team. And for a lot of these things, I find when people are talking about not allowing trans people to join in groups based on their gender identity, they seem to forget trans men exist. They always just don't think about it somehow. And you need to have a system that's going to work across the board. So you can't say trans women can't be with the women and then also say trans men can be with the men or shouldn't be with the women. You look at bathroom bills, nobody wants me in the women's restroom. I don't want to be there. You don't want me there. Yeah.
And that's just the misogyny of our country. It's fine. It's fine for, women to be tomboyish, right? So trans men are a little bit more accepted if they are acknowledged, because going that direction's fine. Whereas moving towards the feminine
is obviously, why would you want to do that?
Yeah, it's
why
wrong.
would you?
It's wrong. Just don't be a jerk.
Just stop caring so much about what other people are doing.
Stop caring. Jeez Louise. If I'm wearing a zoot suit and I say my pronouns are flurg, just use them. It doesn't matter. It matters not at all to you, and it matters so much to the person that's actually experiencing it. I think is the main thing that I just want to hammer home about trans stuff, because jeezy crazy, it just does not affect anyone except for them.
Yeah.
Just be decent.
Well, this might be our last question, just as we're getting closer to our wrap-up time. So I'd like to leave with more of an open-ended question. If you could tell us if you have any last advice for people, particularly youth, that are struggling with issues related to their identity, or if you could tell us what steps we could take to make this area, Hudson specifically, more inclusive, or if there's just anything else you'd like to share with us tonight, please feel free. Thanks.
I guess really the only thing that I have to say, and I am a nerd at heart, so live now, make now always the most precious time. Now will never come again. Captain Jean-Luc Picard said that. It is so hard because I can only speak to my issues and my struggle. I cannot put myself in somebody else's shoes. I cannot say to you, little boy on the street trying to figure out who they are, you need to feel XYZ. You need to do XYZ to feel ABC. But what I can do is listen. What I can do is be here, be somebody that will say, you are valued. You are somebody that needs to be on this planet for a reason of some sort. Again, if we knew the answer, then we would be sitting here. We wouldn't need to have these conversations. We would know our all-powerful creator, and we'd be all content. Q would be here laughing, playing chess with us. Again, I'm a nerd, so. The biggest thing that I would love to see in this community is, and it sounds so cheesy and it sounds so cliche, and it does hit at the home of where some of our issues in the community lie that we need to also face because we're not perfect. But at the simplest, a gay bar here in town. Like, as much as that is something like, oh, we just need to check that box that there's one in town, actually, yes, we kind of do. Only because there is no place for some people to go. Some people are afraid to go to some of the most mainstream places here. I'm lucky I know the service industry. I've worked in the service industry in Hudson, and they are good people. Some of the owners, maybe not, but the people that work there are good people, and you are welcome. But there is no place that we can call home, and many studies have shown that that form of the community has been the only place that we have had safety. Until that changes, where a bar is not the safest place for an LGBTQ person, then I think we need one here in town. And I'd buy everyone the first drink if there was one there, so.
I think I've kind of said all the things that I was going to say about, youth or advice or about this town, but I think an event like this is really wonderful, and I'm really grateful that it exists. And I just hope that this is the start or, part of the continuing conversation of how we can make this community more open and more welcome. And, I'd also, a gay coffee shop would be great. Yes. We do. Yes. We just need we just need a place to sit down. Yes. But there are, that's, Joe to Go, the best coffee shop in town. But anyway, and thank you to everyone who is here, because I think you are the ones who are wanting to make things better in the community and part of what's great about the community. So, and I'm sure there are people watching as well. So I just wanted to say thank you to all of you. So.
Thank you guys.
Are there any questions? I mean, yes, this is a final question. Any question? I mean,
I have a question. So, you brought up a very great point about trans in sports.
Yeah.
And lately, there is a trans woman that's fighting in MMA.
Yeah.
And I'm sure everyone has seen that.
Yeah, and she's awesome.
She is. She's crazy awesome. And there's like this feedback where everyone's like, oh my God, it's a man beating up on women and breaking their skulls open. And it's like, I would like to know what you guys think about this. Like, obviously I support anybody playing a sport, which is great. But this is brought up like, it's very confusing because I feel like genetically,
Yeah.
I'm a large person. I was born a large person.
Sure, yeah. So, the main thing that I think people forget when they're thinking about trans people in sports is that there is way more variation from person to person than there is variation between the sexes, generally speaking, in body size, strength, speed, etc. It tends to be lost because oftentimes you have exactly one example, right? So you're like, okay, we have MMA, which as far as I can tell is people breaking each other's skulls in general. Not my cup of tea, but apparently other people's. And then you get one example of a trans woman in there, and you're like, oh well, is she good at it because she's a trans woman, or is she good at it because she's good at it? Hard to say. And there's so much, like, I guarantee that if I went into an MMA ring with literally any female MMA fighter, I would die. Okay. So.
I probably would too.
Okay. Right? So like there's kind of like people get really hung up on these things because historically we've had these really delineated like sports there's women's sports and there's men's sports. And it wasn't that long ago that women didn't get to play certain sports and men didn't get to play certain sports. It was like, well, you get to play soccer and you get to play field hockey. Why? Nobody knows. Like so much of that ends up in like weird ingrained sexism and strange things, and it's like, is it worth it in these like periodic, like literally probably about 1% of the population cases to sit there and obsess over things? And then that doesn't even get into the actual genetic variations that exist in the general population that most people don't know are there.
Yeah, intersex people exist.
Yeah, so I don't know if you heard, I believe a few years ago there was like an Olympic athlete that suddenly had her medals revoked because somebody did a genetic test and it turns out that her genetics were like XXY or something, which she didn't know. Yeah, that's a thing that happens. You can have people that are single X, XXY, XYY. Like, these are things that happen more often than people realize. And so you reach a point where there's the human gender and sex aren't as binary as we think they are. So it's not worth trying to rigidly enforce it. basically.
And another thing is, like Jason mentioned earlier, the hormones play a huge part in things. This female MMA fighter is super tall and strong. She would be regardless. But one thing that I really like to encourage people to do is you're never going to offend Google. So you can totally type in Google and be like, male to female transition timeline. And there are a lot of ladies who have like YouTube videos of like photos of themselves over the 5-year period of going on estrogen, and truly like the body changes and the muscular changes and all that, it's huge. I mean, most people look at Jason and they would never know that he used to be called Rebecca. And you look like Jason. You don't look like a girl with a beard.
Yeah.
Because he's been on testosterone for 11 years?
Something like that.
Something like 11 years. Yeah, it has a lot of huge physical changes. So that's definitely something to be taken into account as well. Does that help?
Big time.
Make sense?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think there's just there's a lack of education behind everything, which in most.
A lot of emotions and not a lot of education, I think, is
Right.
what happens.
And it's just what you see, so it's like, yes, you can look it up on Google, but I think the reason that everybody's here is because they want to hear it.
Oh, for sure. But like that way you can get the nitty gritty. You know what I mean?
If you want to really get into the science,
Yeah. Without asking Jason to take his shirt off. Google.
Winter.
It is winter. It's cold.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I just want to go ahead and thank everybody that showed up tonight. I think you were absolutely right when you said that it's the people in this room that are here to listen, to learn, and to spread the word. So on behalf of the library, thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming tonight. We really appreciate your bravery. So I'm trying to make sure you can hear me. So thanks to the Hop and Barrel. Thanks to everyone who participated, and see you next time.